All right. My name is Kern Kelly. I'm a director of technology in RSU 19 in Central Maine, in the United States. I also am a director of student agency for EdTech team. I get to work around the world and do workshops with students and pretty much everywhere, which is fantastic. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we have done with the work with the students I've worked with. I should have one joining me right now. There's Brandon. Welcome, Brandon.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Fantastic. Great. So what we're going to do is we'll do a little quick introduction, and then I'll put the presentation on, and we'll go through and kind of do Q&A back and forth. We've got about 100 viewers right now, so we'll start off with you, Brandon. So what's your role? You work with me in RSU 19, and so what's kind of the things that you've worked on?
So a couple things that I have worked on. We obviously run the Tech Sherpa show. It's a live show we do once a week. We usually bring people on to kind of broaden people's knowledge on, expand their knowledge on technology. And people send in questions, we answer them to our best ability. I've also had a part in creating the Google Apps guidebook. I've been places around the country. I've been to Arkansas over the summer. I've been to the BLC conference in Boston. All really just like presenting and helping Kern as much as I can, really.
That's perfect. And so that's kind of a little piece of what we're working on here, the idea of empowering students. And the premise here is that they'll use the technology as the medium for the empowerment as far as setting up their own tech team. So let's do a quick switch over here to our screen share. Okay. So this is the agenda for this little talk, empowering students to operate their own help desk. We'll talk about the history of the Tech Sherpas. Now the Tech Sherpa are my group, the group of students that I work with, and explaining kind of how we set that up and what we do. Also kind of the plans ahead for the Tech Sherpas, like what's going to happen next. We've done quite a few things, so kind of moving forward as well. How to start your own tech team. So one of the most common questions that I get most often is, you know, where do we start? How do we get started for all of this? And so one of the plans of this is to be able to talk about, you know, what the steps that I recommend to be able to do that. And then finally, we will talk a little bit about kind of the certification. My Tech Sherpas have this idea of a Google certification for students and how that works and what that looks like. And of course, questions with time allowing. So the history of the Tech Sherpas will start 2010. There was the Google Teacher Academy. This was down in New York. And one of the things that the Google Teacher Academy is, they're now called the Innovator Academy. It's the same premise, but they've changed the naming of it. But at that time, it was the Google Teacher Academy, and all teachers that went to this event would be expected to do what's called an action plan, to do something with that information they've learned. And so what we ended up doing is, I was asked if I could bring students with me, and I was allowed to, and they came down with me and they presented it, which was fantastic. But at the end of it, the students said, you know, Mr. Kelly, we'd really like to do a student action plan, something that we can, you know, share and bring this information back. And so we were on the train ride back from New York and back up to Maine, and we kind of tossed some ideas around, what could we do? And that was the idea that the Tech Sherpas was born. And so the idea with the Tech Sherpas were this group that we would provide PD, students would provide PD for teachers around the world. Google Hangouts on air was pretty recent at that time, was pretty a new thing. And so we decided that we would do kind of like a weekly live tech help show. And so starting in 2011, the Tech Sherpas started, and then going on till today. And we have, at this point, if you visit TechSherpas.org, every week we have a live tech help show where teachers and educators from around the world can join us live if they want to, very similar to the Google on Air, what we're doing right now. Or if they'd just like to, you know, ask us questions. We have a form right on the page there where teachers can ask us questions, and my students will spend the week kind of researching the answers to those questions, hopefully being able to create a live tutorial for you, and then provide that so that everybody kind of benefit from that. And it's really a win-win. It's obviously good for my students. They learn how to, you know, present and how to be professional and all those kind of things that we want them to do, all those soft skills that we're always looking for with students and opportunities for them. And it's also, of course, good for, you know, teachers other places, because they get a really hopefully just-in-time help every week. They get, you know, PD Friday right to their door. So that's kind of the give back. This has since culminated in our latest project. This summer, we published the Google Apps Guidebook. And what this is this a culmination of many different of lessons that we've done all along and many of the different kind of projects we've worked on. What we found is we'd get a lot of similar questions pretty consistently. And so the idea was what we would do is go on and we have them, basically combine them into a single physical book. Now, of course, there's an ebook as well, electronic version as well. But the idea with the physical book is teachers could follow along and kind of learn about Google Apps themselves, or now G Suite themselves. Or if they want to do these lessons with their students, there's a component, an electronic component that's provided with it called the course book. And that is basically an electronic workbook that students can put their work inside of and walk them through a whole curriculum for learning Google Apps from kind of beginning to end. So here's the apps book. Again, if you have any questions about this, certainly throw those in. It's been really successful so far. We've had a lot of different buy-in. And this also provides the premise for that certification, as I mentioned earlier. And if you've gone through as a student and done all the work through this and submitted this to the Tech Sherpas, they will go through, and the final lesson that you're asked to do is create your own tutorial. Now, this might be a video tutorial. This might be an audio thing. This might be another media. It might be text-based. Everything is, the idea is that it's going to be collect all that information, and then you've shown that you can kind of give back, and then you'll become an honorary Tech Sherpa and go through that certification process. All this information can be found at googleappsguidebook.com. So the certification, hopefully this is, one thing we found is there is, of course, a teacher certification or an educator certification. And the idea is that we want one that's student focused. My Sherpas will look through the work that's completed. And then after they finish this, they'll kind of check in and say yes. And somebody just asked a question I saw is Tech Sherpas on Twitter, and the answer is yes. It's the Tech Sherpas. We'll have that in the show notes as well. So one of the other things that we've been able to do, kind of, again, a culmination of all this work, all this, information we've, developed over the years from questions from educators and from other students and from places we've been, is to design student summits. And what student summits are, the idea is that they're like a PD event, except for they're really designed for kids. They're very high energy. They're really to take the students from in a day from, not sure, maybe they're not sure of the technology or looking for ideas of things they can do in their classrooms, and throughout the day, provide Google tools, help if that's what they're looking for. Also STEM-focused events. We've done ones with, robots and 3D printers and all kinds of cool stuff, and really make it a fun, eventful day for the students themselves, so that when they could have a day. We've typically done this, associated with other PD. So maybe there's like regular, adult PD going on, and we have a student summit that precedes that or follows that. That model works really great. In my opinion, one of the, oops, it was on the speaker. Sorry about that. One of the benefits of having that is the fact that when students, when students have this PD, let's say on a Friday, come Monday morning, all the educators in the school know what they've seen. They've kind of been through that, and they've kind of experienced it themselves. And so one of the ideas is that, nothing pushes the ball forward. Then you have 20 smiling faces, of the students there who want to do this information and want to work with you. And so this is really the idea behind that, is that they'll be able to, use that information to be able to even go further than they would before. So the website that my students and I created, that's based around this idea of, how do we get a tech team started? So this is called TeachToLearnorg. And the idea here, these are different tech teams around the world that we've connected with for different purposes. You'll see all kinds of different student groups here that we've done Hangouts with, or maybe we've done just email contacts with. And the idea is that a lot of the same types of things that people are trying to do is comparable. Like, if you're in South Korea, or if you're in Hawaii, or if you're in, somewhere else in the United States, a lot of different places are trying to set up these opportunities for our students. How can we get them to be able to, learn and use these skill set? And so this is the steps. These are the actual kind of day-to-day steps of how to get started. And this is some of the most common questions that I'm asked, and kind of compiled them on this site. So let's get started here. First, who's in the room? which students get to do these things. One of the events that we were able to take students this year, thanks to EdTech team, was the summit in Hawaii this year. It was actually on Oahu, the Big Island, and one of the cool thing was 2 of my students were presenters. They were part of the keynote at this event, and my understanding it was the largest technology event on the island up to that point. And so the question is, how do they get to go? Who do these, which students get to choose? And I make it very clear with my students when I work with them, it's not necessarily the most tech savvy kids. Those are great. Obviously, we want technology skills, but we can usually teach them those. We can figure that out. We can help them learn those tech skills and develop those tech, those tech chops as they need. The other thing is, the straight A student, the Hermiones, and that's fantastic. We love to have our kids have straight A's, but they don't have to be, a straight A student. The idea is that we will be able to trust those students completely. And why that's so important is this is an opportunity for them to show that they are trustworthy and that they are doing whatever it is that we're working on, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. If you, especially in a situation where they're presenting to other educators, you may not be in the room at that exact time. And so they have to make sure that they're always showing that they're doing, what they're supposed to be doing and doing it well. And so that's really the idea of how people get chosen. Another important aspect of setting up your own tech team or setting up in your school or district is, choosing a time and place. I think it's really important for the students to have a kind of consistent time. Maybe it's a weekly meeting or 2 times a week or whatever that is, in a place they're going to meet. And it kind of gives them that lodestone, something to kind of touch base on. And so what we've done, we actually at our high school level, we actually have a course, a class that the students can join and get credit for. And that's what we have. We have the same place obviously every week. But at the middle school levels that I work in, kind of the 13-year-olds, the 12-year-olds and under, we don't have it as an actual course, but we do have time set every week that I meet with students and work with them. And they're all very, interested obviously in being there, and they want to learn and really give back. And so knowing that they're going to have a weekly opportunity to provide, to add to this, makes a part of this. And that's why one of the reasons why it's so important, but we have the video show is basically because what that does is provides every week my students have an opportunity to go and present online every single week. Not all of them do it obviously, and some choose to and some choose not to as we go forward, but that also helps me understand which students are most serious about as they go forward and they're interested in doing workshops and presentations. The work itself, what will the students actually be doing? One thing I think is important is that we make it clear that we never give students admin privileges or kind of network, advanced privileges, not because they couldn't handle it. I have students that are very savvy that could totally handle the technology component of that. But one of the things is I make sure that I never put students in a situation that through no fault of their own, something might happen, and it's not their fault, but something bad might happen. For example, say something happened with the network and went down or whatever. If a student had that kind of availability, again, not that they did anything wrong, but they could get blamed for something that we don't want that to happen. So it's really important that they do have some freedoms and some opportunities, but not necessarily anything that's going to kind of hurt them later on. And that also means, what else are they actually doing? Yes, we have students helping work on, physical computers, hardware type stuff. I have one student right now that's working on creating the required trainings. Like every school system, I'm sure, in the world has certain trainings that are required by all their staff. Things like, fire extinguisher training or ladder training or, bloodborne pathogens or all those type of kind of testing they usually do at the beginning of the year. I have one student, their project for the year is to create a self-correcting system online that they'll be able to, have their teachers go through and take it themselves instead of paying for a third party to do this. We'll do it in-house. And of course, that's something they can give back. I think that this is really important. One of the questions that came up, I could see through the questions here, is can you start a tech team as a teacher, or do you need the school board or technology director to this? My personal kind of edupunk view of that is yes, 100% you can start as a teacher. Obviously, with the support administration, they don't necessarily have to be working on something that's mission critical. They can be working on a classroom website, or they can be working on their own, work for school and kind of digitizing it and making it more, technology focused that way. The things they can be doing do not have to be, like high-end stuff that's gonna, like, they're worried about something bad happening. Usually, the kids that that you go to districts or schools that the most savvy and most curious about this stuff are the ones you want to bring into this question, because those are the ones that they're curious, right? They're kids, and so we want to give them an opportunity so for them to be able to use that information, use that those powers for good rather than for evil. Sharing resources, it's really important that you have a place that resources can be shared. Ideally, a website, or maybe it's a group, an online, a Google group, or maybe it's a G+ group, or something, a blog, some way that when they do the work, they're going to be able to have an audience beyond just the students that are the teachers that they work with every day. So that's really crucial, is that it's not just they're doing this and it kind of goes in a vacuum and they don't know where it goes. It's going to a bigger audience, and that way the other benefit of that is ideally is you're able to archive this stuff. So as they go forward, as they're helping teachers and helping other students, they have a place to reference. So if somebody said, oh, how do you do this thing? And they say, oh, you know what? We already know how to do this. We've done it before. Here's the tutorial we've created. Again, there's a million different resources out there to be able to options. You can, of course, use a blog, from Google Blogger or a Google site, or again, there's a million different versions. It doesn't really matter per se which one you use. The benefit of it is, though, is that something that they can reference easily. So you do want to have the kids think up of a good name. I think it's worth the time for them to come up with kind of a nickname or a logo or something for the group. That's one of the first things I recommend doing, because that gives them that ownership of the group. And it's worth sharing too. I think it's important that if something that's related to them, so maybe it's something around the school mascot or something that is pertinent to the area rather than just kind of a random one. The other thing that I think it's worth mentioning about the resources and kind of the work itself is I don't recommend sitting and waiting for somebody to ask questions. And one group I've talked to before, and they were kind of a help desk, but the kids would wait for teachers to send in emails, to say, oh, I need help with certain things. And that's fine. That's no problem with that. But making sure that the kids also have something to do while they have downtime. Because if they're always just waiting for someone to ask a question, that's just asks for trouble, right? So if they have the opportunity to basically be able to get feedback at any time, but they also are able to do work on other projects at the same time, I think that's really important. So what's next for the Tech Sherpas, kind of what's coming down the pike? Again, we have many different, student summits lined up this year coming up. We have one possibly, it looks like it's going to happen in Japan, Kobe, Japan, in February, so we're super excited about that. We also have one coming up in Texas, Temple, Texas, in January. And so this is, again, through EdTech Team, and we'll be doing a student summit there. This was a grant that they won, and so it's a really huge opportunity for my students to be able to go and give back, really, to do those workshops, to offer PD for those kids. And part of the model there is those students that we work with will now be doing professional development for other places. We did a grant last year for a student summit for Dallastown, Pennsylvania, and they have a school there for 100 students. And it was a huge success. We had a great time doing it. My students did. But then I realized, afterward, after the event happened, we've been contacted since then. And those 100 students that were there, they were fifth graders, have now provided more PD and more training for other students. And that's kind of the idea, is this kind of rolls forward as we go forward. So questions, I'm going to look through now, and let's jump back, and we'll bring Brandon back into the questions here. Hey, Brandon, I don't know if you have a chance to see the opportunity to see the questions. I can throw them on for you if you don't.
Yeah, that'd be perfect. Okay,
let me throw them on real quickly here. I will email them to you. I think that'll be the easiest way.
All right.
But what we'll do is we'll go through and kind of take questions, either from Brandon, as one of the students that have done a lot of work with me over the years and really into this. But let's look through. Okay, so I just sent those to you.
All right.
Okay. So I've got, can you share the Google Apps guidebook? And I certainly can. I'll just pull that up real quickly here so you guys can see it. The website to pull it up the easiest way is googleappsguidebook.com. And there is, like I mentioned, a paperback version or an ebook version. They're both basically the same thing. We will be making updates. Of course, Google changes, technology all the time. That's just the nature of the beast. And so as changes are made, we'll just keep updating it as quickly as we can. But if you're interested in any of that, please let me know. The idea is your students or yourself would go through that and get a training, and then you can get the student certification upon completion on that. Oops, I didn't do a screen share. Hang on. Quick screen share here. Here we go. Here's the Google Apps Guidebook.com. All right, another question. Interested to create a tech team for our school? I'm at elementary school. Love the fifth graders to be involved. Yeah, so as far as the age levels go, I work generally with high school and then some middle school. I also do work in the elementary grade levels. Obviously, what they're able to do is a little bit different. However, I think it's really important to start that mindset younger. Some people ask me every once in a while, how do you get such a successful group of high school kids that are doing this technology stuff and presentations? How do you do this? And my response is that you don't start a winning sports team, at the high school year. You start very young, and they obviously get better and better as they practice and get older. And so for us, we're starting our kids, as young as say 3rd or 4th grade, where they're starting to help other teachers and other students. And I really can find out which kids are really into this and which kids really want to be there. And then obviously by the time they get to middle school and by the time they get to high school, it's old hat. They've been doing it all along, and so it's not as big a thing for them to kind of join. Tech Sherpa show use a tool like Jing to screencast. Okay, so this is one. I don't know, Brandon, if you want to talk about our process as far as physically what we use.
Yeah, that'd be perfect. So we actually record off of a regular Mac monitor, and we go through Google Hangouts all the time. We make sure we set up the lower third, so we have that little like intro bar that we have, so you know what we're talking about. We also have a script. Every show we fill out the script, and we make sure that we review any questions that people have sent us. We make sure we answer them to our best ability. But usually, like Kern said, we'll take the week after reviewing the question. We'll get as much information from the to answer the question as we can, and we also it's a great way to actually experience all of the questions people have, and you learn the process through answering the question, and I feel like it's fantastic.
Awesome. So one of the questions that came up is an example of one of the activities or tests in the Google Apps Guidebook. These are things, all the projects, each chapter is based on a single tool. So it might be Google Docs, Google Slides, spreadsheets, or it could be third-party apps, Chrome. The idea is that if you go from a class that doesn't have a lot of experience with Google Apps, each project is based on that to give you an example to be able to basically not only will they finish the project, but they also have a really good understanding of how that tool works. A quick example is like we use Google Slides to do animation. It works really well in science or a lot of different subject areas. And so by the time that they're done that project, the kids have a thorough understanding of Google Slides, how they work, how they can use them for other things. And so that's the premise of this. We have them for pretty much all the major tools. We steered away from some things like Google Groups, which is a little bit hard to make a project around, but all the major creation tools that you would use in the classroom, that's the idea of it, that you'd be able to use those for this purpose. Let's see. So somebody asked about, do I have info on created the structure for Tech Sherpas? The quickest way, the two websites to go to, TeachSherpas.org is our website for the actual group, but also TeachToLearn, and it's regular TO, .org, and that is kind of more setting up a tech team in general, not just specifically for this, but in general setting up your own student tech team and how to be able to do that. Looking through for more questions. Okay. Let's see, someone mentioned about the student summits. It is amazing. I will do one kind of final pitch for student summits. It looks like our time's getting close. But yes, if you have the opportunity to do a student summit or go see one or have your students involved, highly recommend it. The benefit of it is that, again, is your students see other students in action, like what this looks like. And of course, as good as we as teachers and as adults can be, kids are better, right? If they can see them, what it looks like, whether you have a student that is actually to be able to, to present and to be professional and also talk about that topic. We've since now, other schools that I've worked with have now instituted their own kind of student tech teams, and they've now had their students basically running PD for educators, technology educators. And the ultimate benefit of this is really twofold. One, obviously, the teachers, have that benefit in their classroom. If they say, hey, I'm having trouble with this thing, my computer's not working, the projector's down, whatever that is, they might have a helper right in the room. And they understand that it's okay for them to kind of try that out and help them and work together on that. And then ultimately, the biggest goal of this is for our own students. They have the experience now. They have that exposure. They have that professionalism. Really, it opens up doors that they just didn't have before, because now they can say, yes, I presented in front of 1,000 people or 500 people. And that's an opportunity that we really want to give our kids if we can do so. One final question here. I think you're running up in time here. Do you teach students specific troubleshooting for problems? Yes. The answer to that is troubleshooting as a skill set is something I think has been lost. Nowadays, most of us are users, we're consumers of technology, but not necessarily creators. We're not necessarily, we're not building our own computers as much anymore, or we're not, building things like we used to be. So that whole mindset of troubleshooting, of moving things individually step by step is very crucial for kids. And it's one thing that, again, you really have to do. You can't read a book about it. You can't watch a video about it to kind of understand. You have to really do it and experience it to have a better, internal understanding of that. And so I think that's a really important thing for our kids to, again, make that opportunity for them to have that kind of running, troubleshooting and asking questions and finding answers to things. One thing I told my students, like they've asked before, what if I work with a teacher and I don't know the answer? Okay, follow that through. What if? No big deal, right? It's okay. If you don't know the answer to this thing, it's not the end of the world. You'll just be able to basically go tell them, I don't know, I'll go research it. Once you've done the research, you'll be able to come back and you'll be able to help them at that point on. So it's not a thing where it's do or die, where they have to know the answer to every question. Of course, that's impossible. What is important that they maintain, that they're being professional. If they're not sure of a question, they say, you know what, I'm not sure, Mrs. Smith, I can't help you right now, but I'll go research that and I'll come back to you. That's what we're looking for. That's the kind of the exposure that we want them to get. One last question, I think it is, because I think we're running up time here. What would the guys consider an optimal amount of hours or minutes per week? I really think that's dictated by, to meet with your tech team. I think it depends on your grade level. The high school kids, we actually have a course. Somebody asked about would we have credit for this, and we do. At our high school level, we have a course that our students take, and they meet with us basically twice a week. And in that time, they work on projects. They're working on all kinds of different things. We have money for projects going. We have computer, programming projects going. We have 3D printing projects going. Lots of different things going on. At the middle school level, I meet with different students at different schools once a week, and we could meet more, but that's usually enough. Like once a week, and we meet during either their after school or during their recess or their break time during the day. And the thing about middle school students is generally they don't have cars, they don't have girlfriends, boyfriends, so they're have a little bit more free time generally, so more into it and willing to be there. Than some of the younger kids. And then the younger kids, I meet with them, again, it's one of my biggest success stories is when one of the schools I work in is K through 8, and very quickly after I kind of worked with certain 8th graders and got them comfortable going down to the younger grades and helping them and doing PD for them, that I was kind of out of the loop. The teachers would just straight up ask the students directly, hey, are you available today? Can you come down and help me? And that's what we're looking for, right? Because that means that they've got the trust, they have the workflow, they understand what to do, and they also know that if something goes wrong, they're not sure what to do, no big deal. They'll be able to ask us tomorrow. We'll be able to work with them and really kind of succeed from that. So I think with that, I hope I didn't miss anybody. Any of the questions, it looks like. And if I did, I will spend around a little time on the chat if you want. And so if you have other questions, go in and get answered by text. But with that, I'd like to thank everybody. And Brandon,
thank you. Thank you for tuning in.
Yeah. And hopefully we'll see you guys online. Again, if you join us on TechSherpas.org, we have a weekly live tech help show. Usually Tuesdays or Wednesdays. Not every, sometimes it changes, but usually Tuesdays or Wednesdays. They're all archived, so if you answer a question and you ask us, and if we have the answer for it, we'd be more than happy to help you. But if something we've answered before, we might refer you back to an archive show. But hopefully we'll see you online.